So you're in an abusive relationship. Your partner mistreats you, they're controlling, they may even put their hands on you. It's obvious that you need to leave this relationship, but there's a problem. Even though you rationally know you should leave this relationship, you're having a hard time actually making the decision. Get your hand off me. What you're experiencing is called a trauma bond. And as a therapist, I encounter these situations all the time. People who are psychologically trapped in relationships, even when they have the means to escape. The only obstacle that's getting in their way is them making the decision to actually leave.
Baby, don't leave me!
What's going on, everybody? My name is John Burt. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and therapist extraordinaire. And you're in another session with the Chocolate Therapist. In today's session, I'll be serving up a masterclass on the topic of trauma bonds. If you ever seen someone who's obviously in a toxic relationship and asked yourself, why the hell are they still with that person? Well, that's the question I'll be answering today. But in order to get there, we'll have to do three things. First, we'll define what a trauma bond actually is. Then we'll talk about the characteristics of people who struggle with trauma bonds. And lastly, we'll talk about the origin story of why you have a trauma bond. So now that we have the plan laid out, let's go ahead and jump right in. So the question is, what is a trauma bond? There's a lot of us walking around thinking that a trauma bond is this cute relationship where two people with a history of trauma come together. We might even think that their history with trauma helps them build a deep, intimate connection because both people in the relationship have experienced trauma and knows how it feels to be mistreated, abused, and taken advantage of. There's even a belief that it's easier to connect through these shared experiences of hurt, and that this leads to a relationship where you're embraced by the other with more empathy, more love, and more patience. You'll be all right. This sounds beautiful and nice, right? But no. Unfortunately, a trauma bond is the furthest thing away from this. A trauma bond is a staple that you will only find in abusive and toxic relationships. It's the puzzling bond that happens between an abuser and a victim. You know you're in a trauma bonded relationship when your partner continuously mistreats you, abuses you, neglects your needs, abandons you, criticizes you, cheats on you, and overall is just simply an asshole to you. But despite all this, you still opt to stay in the relationship. The trauma bond can be best described as Stockholm Syndrome. It's this weird phenomenon where despite all the odds of being treated like shit, you still somehow develop a positive feeling and grow attached towards your abuser. Instead of trying to leave your relationship, you attempt to prove your worth to your abuser.
Is this better?
By taking on the role of becoming a fixer. As the fixer, you're motivated by four things: anxiety, self-protection, fear of abandonment, and the need to protect others. With these as your motivations, you're always vigilant and on edge, trying to anticipate anything you might think will trigger the people around you. You learn to become acutely aware of your partner's volatile emotions and are constantly trying to keep the peace. You enter each interaction walking on eggshells, always trying to mediate and find a solution that will prevent you from incurring your partner's wrath. You do this because you're conflict averse, which means that you'll do anything to avoid conflict. This often involves you prioritizing your partner's needs while repressing your own. You avoid setting boundaries and voicing your point of view because boundaries invites conflict and tension into your relationships. And tension is the last thing you want to experience in your relationships. Because another aspect of knowing you're in a trauma bonded relationship is the constant fear of the relationship ending and losing your partner. There's this visceral sense of panic at the thought of the relationship ending, and you cannot fathom living without your partner even when every rational cell in your body knows it's not good for you.
Come on, you gotta go, come on.
No.
So at this point, a trauma bond sounds exhausting. And it is, but we're just now scratching the surface on the topic. What we've covered so far gives us a basic understanding of what a trauma bond is. But let's dive a little deeper into the topic. There are two characteristics of people who experience trauma bonds: those that are prone to self-betrayal and those that lack the ability to be authentic. Let's break it down. Let's talk about self-betrayal. We become prone to self-betrayal when we haven't learned what it means to love ourselves. There's a lot that can go into defining what self-love is. For the purposes of this video, I'll keep it simple. Self-love is the ability to prioritize your own needs. The biggest obstacle to you achieving self-love is your fear of disappointing others. When we're devoid of self-love, that's when betrayal becomes a major part of our lives. Self-betrayal happens when we don't value our own opinion of ourselves. And because of this, you have stopped doing the work required to become someone that you actually admire. When you no longer value what you think about yourself, three things happen. Number 1, you no longer challenge yourself to live by a higher standard. Number 2, you lack the self-awareness required to live a life that you're proud of. And lastly, but most importantly, number 3, you succumb to the pressure to people please. A trauma bond is only possible when you're not the primary source of love in your life. When this is the case, there will be a void that you're desperate to fill through relationships with other people. You will become determined to find your special somebody that will give you the love, admiration, and respect you can't provide for yourself. And this will cause you to settle for a relationship far below what you actually deserve for yourself. When being in a relationship is your only source of validation, you will try to make yourself the hero in all of your relationships. You do this by responding in the ways you think others want you to respond, and by avoiding the tension that comes with confronting others. You won't ever risk doing anything that you think will make others angry with you. So in other words, you betray yourself. Next, the second characteristic that you'll see in those who struggle with the trauma bond is a lack of authenticity. The best way I can go about explaining this to you is by defining what authenticity actually is. Authenticity is achieved when you understand who you are and you give yourself permission to show up as your authentic version of yourself. To be authentic is to be genuine, honest, and comfortable with who you are and what you're about. It involves staying constantly mindful of practicing what you believe in and not letting fear take over when you're facing adversity, hurting, or confronted with an obstacle. At the foundation of authenticity is courage. This is your ability to navigate uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. If I was to sum up authenticity, I would say it requires 3 things. Number 1, it requires self-awareness. This is your ability to pay attention to how you feel and what you need. Number 2, it requires you to have a standard for yourself. This is your ability to hold yourself to a standard that gives you permission to live in a way that you respect, admire, and love. And number 3 is courage. This is your ability to respect yourself enough to take that internalized awareness and standard that we just talked about and now share it with those around you and the world as a whole, especially when it's uncomfortable and hard. When you lack authenticity, you're much more susceptible to finding yourself in trauma-bonded relationships. No! So let's take a step back. Now that we understand what a trauma bond is, let's break down and talk about how it happens. The question we're going to be answering is, what is the origin story for people who find themselves in trauma-bonded relationships? You will find that people who are unable to leave abusive relationships aren't crazy. They're not masochists who are out here loving people who mistreat them for no reason. There's always a reason behind someone's craziness. In the case of someone who's susceptible to trauma bonds, there are 2 reasons as to why they are prone to be trapped in abusive and toxic relationships. Reason number 1 is that you grew up in an abusive, neglectful, or with a narcissistic parent. And reason number 2 is that you got into an intimate relationship with a narcissist. Let's break both of them down. First, let's focus on those who grew up with abusive, neglectful, and narcissistic parents. Childhood with a narcissistic parent means growing up in an unpredictable, confusing household where love was conditional. In your family, you must earn your love because you are judged on the basis of what you can do and provide for your narcissistic parent. Growing up, your parents were never attuned to your needs because their needs were always prioritized. And this leads to a relationship where you're constantly dismissed, invalidated, manipulated, blamed, and criticized, resulting in abusive behavior becoming a normalized part of your life, which makes you much more vulnerable to narcissist and abusive people being able to easily wander into your life. Because children can't break up with their parents and can't survive without them, in order for you to protect yourself and survive your shitty relationship with your parents, you have to learn to adapt to your environment. You learn to slowly alter yourself to manage their moods and win them over, and maintain a relationship by silencing your own voice. You normalize and justify your parents' invalidation and abusive behavior. Over the years, you kept secrets for them, you blamed yourself for the problems that arose in your guys' relationship, you denied your own needs, and you learned to idealize your parents even though there's not much to be proud of. You've gotten so good at this after all the years of doing it that you no longer acknowledge and see your abusive parents as bad. Being brought up having never experienced what genuine love looks like, you learn to accept being mistreated, as you weren't raised in a family that instilled in you the worthiness required to hold others accountable for their harmful behaviors. So let's say that this isn't you. You grew up in a loving household with supportive parents, and the word abusive is the furthest thing you'd use to describe your childhood. But still, you ended up in the same situation of falling into a toxic relationship, having a hard time leaving. Well, this brings us to the second reason you ended up in a trauma-bonded relationship. You entered into a relationship with a narcissist. Let's break it down. Part of understanding why some of us get stuck in narcissistic relationships, despite being relatively healthy people, is by understanding that narcissists are really good at making first impressions. Narcissistic relationships usually start out as intoxicating, passionate, and exciting. The relationship feels like a fairy tale. You feel desired, seen, and valued as you're getting the attention you always wanted from a relationship. And you guys are starting to have an amazing experience together. He's giving you the good morning queen wake up text. He's charming and fascinating. He's an attentive listener. And he presents himself as being all the answers to your current problems in life. He makes you happy. He takes away your loneliness. Plus, he's f***ing you like a porn star. And you guys are talking about all the promising things in your future together. Any hesitancy that you may have had in the relationship is starting to drift away. And you start to let your guard down and fully buy into the relationship. Well, just know at this point, he got your ass. Because just like magic, he sensed your defenses starting to lower, and a shift suddenly happens. And a lot of those loving gestures start to be replaced with selfish and inconsiderate actions. Look, I'm playing the game right now. I don't get time to be listening to you right now. Your relationship has suddenly gone from an exciting prospect full of long-term potential to a constant experience of being devalued, manipulated, and invalidated. So, what happened here? Just know that you were love bombed. Love bombing is a technique that abusers use to overwhelm you with the captivating experiences that get you hooked on the idea that you finally found your person, and that the love story that you always have been wanting is finally here. Love bombing serves the purpose of manipulating you to become so emotionally attached to the initial idealized version of the relationship you were first presented with. You are so bought into the relationship that when the narcissist shows their true colors, there's an apprehension on your part to leave. Going from being love bombed to being mistreated is a very jarring and confusing experience. When this switch happens, there are two things that get in the way of being able to see the signs required to leave a trauma-bonded relationship. We already covered the first, which is that you desire for the relationship to work out. And the second reason is that you're a very empathetic, forgiving, and understanding person. In healthy relationships, these are all beneficial traits. But in the narcissistic relationship, these are all something that will be taken advantage easily by the narcissist. All right, slow it down. In narcissistic relationships, empathetic people are at risk of giving way too many second chances, forgiving too easily, and always attempting to see the other person's point of view. Again, in a perfect world, these will all be ideal traits, but we don't live in a perfect world. Overly empathetic people have no limit on the lengths they will go to be the rescuers for other people. Empathetic people, in a lot of cases, aren't actually empathetic. They're really just people pleasers who place the needs of others above their own. A people pleaser's self-worth is tied into making things better for those around them, with the motivation to not be a burden or to cause the same harm to others that they've experienced themselves. They will tell themselves not to leave a relationship in fear of what the negative impact of leaving might have on their partners. Another trap that empathetic people fall into is the genuine belief that everyone has the potential to change. So if you give someone another chance, then maybe something will click this time and perhaps they will actually change. To put it bluntly, you're a well-intentioned sucker who has a naive view on the world that can easily be exploited by people who have no problem taking advantage of others. And just know that there's a lot of people out there looking for a sucker that can manipulate. So, I think we did a great job of explaining what a trauma bond is, but just in case you're still questioning if you in fact are in a trauma bonded relationship, let's make it easy for you. Here are the 10 things you can look out for that will let you know that you're in a trauma bonded relationship. Number 1, you often justify your partner's abusive and invalidating behaviors. Number 2, you fear conflict with your partner and constantly have to apologize to make the relationship work out. Number 3, you hide the toxic aspects of your relationship from other people, or you rationalize your partner's toxic behavior to people who know the details. Number 4, you have an all-consuming fear of what will happen if the relationship ends. Number 5, there's always conflict in your relationship. For example, you and your partner are always breaking up and then making up and repeatedly fighting over the same things over and over again. Number 6, you hide your feelings and your needs from your partner. Number 7, you feel pity and guilt for having bad thoughts about the relationship. Number 8, you believe your partner's repeated promises that they're going to change, even when they've proven time and time again that they're never going to actually change. Number 9, you have to always appease your partner and walk on eggshells to avoid their rage. Oh my God, what the freak?
Honey.
And finally, number 10, you constantly attempt to read your partner's mind and to anticipate their needs. So, you know what a trauma bond is now, but how do we start doing the work towards healing? Outside of going to therapy, which I highly recommend, one way you can start making progress towards healing is by educating yourself. And a book I highly recommend is called It's Not You by by Dr. Romani D'Souza. How do you pronounce it, boo?
Basula?
By Dr. Romani D. It's a book that covers how to heal from narcissistically abusive relationships. And it's where I got most of the information I covered in this video. If you're trying to recover from an abusive relationship, then I highly recommend reading this book. If you're interested in buying it, then I will leave the affiliate link in the description of this video. Other than that, I think we're unfortunately at the worst part of the video, and that's the end. If you made it this far, you might as well go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Also, do me a favor and please leave your boy some love in the comment section. If you want to continue to learn about abusive relationships, then I recommend a video right here on narcissism. It's a good one, so go ahead and give it a watch. Anyway, God bless you guys, and I hope to see you guys in the next session. Bye-bye. What?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What do you usually have?
I don't know, I forgot.
I don't like bye-bye. Action.
God bless, and I'll see you guys in the next session.
Action. You're gross.
And this leads to a relationship where you're constantly dismissed, invalidated, manipulated, blamed, and criticized, resulting in abusive... Why do I do these long-ass f***ing lists, man? Bro, this shit is crazy. We're deleting that shit next time. Well, just know at this point, he got your ass.
That was weird.
He got your ass.